everyone, it's Dr. Erin here, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Good Doctors Diagnose for August 26th. And today I'm going to be talking about something very specific to gender equity issues in America, because today is also Women's Equality Day. And you'll see on our social media some posts relating to that, but basically Women's Equality Day is a day that celebrates the passage of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which happened 99 years ago today in 1920. And the 19th Amendment basically allowed women the right to vote. It should be said very explicitly that it allowed white women the right to vote. Native women and Black women particularly got their rights much later on. So though we celebrate the amazing work of the suffragettes and the women's right to vote movement that culminated in the 19th Amendment, we have to recognize its failings, particularly in its acceptance of women of color and narratives of color around suffragette movements, and the lack of suffrage for women of color until much later on in our country's history. So that being said, because today is Women's Equality Day, I wanted to do a specific Good Doctors Diagnose about some gender-related issues. So what I would like to talk about is something we talk about a lot here at Abbey Research. It is menstrual inequality, and basically the access or lack of access that women have to menstrual hygiene products. And one of my favorite case studies that we'll use as an example of this, the story I like to tell the most, is a story told by Alyssa Mastromonaco, who was the director of scheduling in advance in the Obama administration, and then eventually the deputy White House chief of staff. And she published her memoir of her time in the White House a few years ago, and in it she tells this remarkable story about how she got the first tampon machine in the White House in the year of our Lord 2012. Tampons have been around for quite a while. Menstrual hygiene products have been around for even longer. But this was the first time that in the West Wing, where the politics operate in the United States White House, that there was a tampon machine accessible. And she basically told the story as, women who worked in the White House were struggling. Sometimes your period comes when you're not expecting it. You don't always have the products that you need available. And she was spending all of this time making sure that she had extra supplies in her desk. Running out to CVS when you work at the White House is not something that is easily done, but women were having to do that. And so she finally brought it up in a meeting and said, look, I think we should have a tampon machine available in the women's restrooms in the West Wing. And everybody was on board. Everybody said, yeah, that's a great idea. We just didn't think of it. And that's one of the things I think for me that is most significant about this storyline, right? Or this case study. When you aren't asking women and you aren't listening to women and you don't necessarily have women in positions of leadership which they can express their needs, you don't think of it. And so it was this benign neglect in a sense where it was just like, oh yeah, sure, that's not a problem. But because the people in power and in leadership positions in this particular organizational culture didn't have uteruses, it just didn't occur to them that providing basic sanitary products was a necessity. And so it's one of those things we can have a lot of conversations about the pink tax and the extra tax that women pay on sanitary and hygiene products because they are considered a luxury. It's a biological, physiological necessity, much like toilet paper. Women menstruate until menopause. It happens once a month. We can't really do anything about it. But what we can do is provide services for women, particularly to our employees at work, providing these basic hygienic products. And my favorite addendum to this case study story was that the first time I learned about it a few years ago, I was meeting some friends at a co-working space and telling them about this story in the middle of the open kitchen at a co-working space, regardless of who was around to hear me talk about how incensed I was that, nobody had thought to provide tampons in the West Wing. and that this is what it took to get basic hygienic products in a place as powerful as the West Wing. And unbeknownst to myself, one of the managers of that co-working space was unloading the dishwasher at the time, as I was having this mini rant in the kitchen. And my friend who works at that space was very happy to report to me that a few weeks later, a box of tampons appeared in the ladies' restroom. And I don't want to credit myself with that, but I would like to think that even just hearing that kind of conversation in a public space helped that person to think, oh, this is something I should provide for the people that work for me. And so it's those little things when we're talking about gender inequity. The right to vote was an amazing thing, flawed as it was, in not including women of color and Native women, or Black women and Native women. But there's a lot of things that can happen on a smaller scale as well that we can work to dismantle some of these systemic inequities that we face. So that is why I like this lesson, really, and why I wanted to use it as a case study on Women's Equality Day, because a lot of times it can seem really overwhelming to tackle these really big gender issues of bias and harassment and the big cultural stories that we've heard in the last couple of years coming out of the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, and a lot of coverage in the last year about the horrific sex abuse scandal in U.S. women's gymnastics. So we have all of these really big systemic cultural issues. But I'm here to tell you that you can do work on a small scale just to make sure that the women who are in your office who are dealing with biological issues that are associated with their sex, you can provide support for them. And this goes to providing tampons and pads, to providing spaces for women who are nursing or who are breastfeeding, and even just understanding as much as you can the physiological impact of what menstruation does to a woman's body, to her stress level, to her pain level, to her energy level. A lot of women experience migraines and a light sensitivity, all of these types of things that we do our best to control and mitigate in an office situation. But as an empathetic and emotionally intelligent leader, you can provide support for the women in your office as well. So that is the Good Doctors Diagnose for Monday, August 26th. I am Dr. Erin, and we will see you all for our next edition on Wednesday. Take care, everyone.